So can you all see my screen? Just want to make sure. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So thanks everybody for joining this call. This is part of the series of the Career Go community. We are here to help everybody get hired, get employed in the job they love. And this call is going to be recorded and streamed in YouTube and other social media. So just a quick disclaimer: if you're not comfortable being streamed or recorded, please leave the session now. So today's topic is reading and adjusting to personality types. We'll speak at the end about the objective and the contents of the call, but just a quick about the community. So the community will boost your networking, practice and skills, and focus on knowledge on specific topics. Our target is get everybody in a job they love, and as well as find your full potential. So this is going to be, can mute please. Michelle, just mute. Yeah. So the call structure is just if you're comfortable sharing your LinkedIn profile in the chat, this would be good so that everybody can connect with everybody. The speaker, Corey, today will give us some time at the end for Q&A. Please limit your questions to 2 minutes so that other attendees have a chance to ask their questions. At the end of the call, we appreciate your feedback. We do a survey. It's a 1 minute quick survey that we understand from it, how we can serve you, what you really expect for us for the next calls, so that we can provide you with the speakers and the topic that you need. At the end of the call, we also would like to have a group selfie. So please stay till the end. This is a good memory for all of us to have, and we share it also on the social media as a celebration for the whole team who joined. Kudos and recommendations. This whole team is voluntarily supporting you and trying their best to help you. If you can be so kind to give the speaker, kudos and recommendations on LinkedIn, that will be definitely helpful as well for you as a job seeker. Our goal is to get 1,000 plus getting hired in 2021, applying those learnings. So, please share with us when you get hired. You definitely gonna get hired, if you apply those learnings. Previously, we have people who get hired through this learnings within 3 to 6 months. So continue to attend those sessions, continue to apply what you learn, continue to ask questions, teach others what you learn. This is exactly how you will get hired, and when you become good in what you learned. Please engage and ask questions, connect with others. So we have lots of great material in our YouTube channel. If you want to leverage those previous recordings, those ones will be available in our YouTube channel, and the YouTube channel is in the invite or in the Eventbrite as well, and it will be posted in the chat too. So next calls is going to be Networking 101 this Sunday, and then Thursday it's going to be how to turn cultural differences into cultural intelligence in your job search strategy. So again, topics are very good, so please try to join next Sunday and next Thursday. Those also will be posted in Eventbrite and Facebook and LinkedIn. So today's topic, reading and adjusting to personality types. The objective of the call will be to allow the attendees to leave with a better understanding of the 4 common personality types they will encounter daily and how to adjust to each to build stronger relationships and increase opportunities. Our speaker, Corey Poirier, I hope I pronounced it correctly, sorry about that, is a multiple-time TEDx, MoMondays and PMx speaker. He's also the host of the top-rated Let's Do Influencing show, founder of Blue Talks, and he is a Barnes and Noble, Amazon, Apple Books, and Kobo best-selling author who has spoken on site at Harvard University. With that, I will hand it over to you, Corey. The floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Ahmed. And I'm going to check first and foremost that you can see my, see here, my slides. Can you see my slides right now?
Yes, we can see it. If you want to put it in presentation mode.
Yeah.
Yes, it's good.
Yeah. Okay, perfect stuff. So what I'm going to cover today is reading and adjusting to personality types. And what I'm about to share with you was a game changer for me in relation to, I'm going to say, taking my career to the next level, getting opportunities that I wouldn't have got otherwise. But most importantly, at a time whenever I was new to my career, and this is going back a number of years, but new to my career in sales, I was struggling with, I was struggling with being the new guy in the block who wasn't making the sales, whose manager was calling him into the office and saying every second week, it seemed like, if you don't get your sales numbers up, we're going to have to let you go. And nothing seemed to change until I discovered the power of understanding personality types and how to adjust to the personality types that were in front of me. Now, the really cool thing about what we're covering today is it obviously relates completely to getting employment, because when you're in a job interview, when you're talking to somebody who potentially could hire you, knowing and understanding their personality type and how to adjust to that is going to take you miles in terms of building a strong relationship, because you can build a really quick relationship and a strong relationship if that person feels like you totally get them and you understand them. And if you can quickly read their personality type and adjust to them, it feels like you can understand them. And so how I used this in sales was, if I was going into talk with a customer and I noticed that they were really high energy, then I would amp up my energy a bit so that way they'd feel like this person gets me. At the same token, if the person was very deliberate and they weren't as high energy as that, then I would tone down my personality. And so what happened is I was basically becoming almost like a chameleon to that person. I was like a mirror, and not in a manipulative way, but actually truly understanding that person's personality type and appreciating that person's personality type, and understanding that just because it's not the same as mine normally doesn't mean it's a bad or a good thing. So that's what I'm going to cover today. And again, it really, I feel, relates in a big way to whenever you're sitting in front of somebody, whether it's a job interview, whether it's somebody recommending you, you can build a really strong relationship if you can understand what makes them tick and how they're a little bit different than somebody else. So, and we talked about my bio, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but just to give you some context in terms of my experience in the world of communication, so you know that this isn't my first day in the world of communication. I spent 9 years performing stand-up comedy some 700 times. So on the left side there, you'll see me performing stand-up comedy on a stage. And again, that's something I did almost 10 years of my life. And something I learned is that stand-up comics know as much or more about communication as anybody else, because they study communication like nobody else. For instance, if you're performing on a stage, it's not abnormal for you to film your performance and then watch it later and basically analyze every single aspect of why you got a laugh or why you didn't get a laugh when you shared a certain joke. And so that's one aspect of my background. The middle aspect, the picture in the middle, represents my, as I mentioned, my sales career and my business career. And of course, in the business and sales world, you learn a lot about communication, how to not get rejected when you're making a sales call, how to get the job. And the job could be a real job or could be a figurative job, like you're getting the contract. Then the third photo there is, well, it's me with Cheech and Chong, two well-known celebrities. But what that picture represents is the other side of my life, is that I've spent the last 15 years interviewing high achievers. And so I've done now over 6,500 interviews. And so you get to learn a lot about communication interviewing that many people. And so the culmination of all that, 10 years of performing stand-up comedy, 20 plus years in sales and business, and then 6,500 interviews over the course of 10 plus years, kind of gives you a feel for that. I've spent my whole life in communication. And that's sort of the experience I bring to this tonight. So first of all, I wanted to talk about why it even matters. Why should it matter if you adjust your communication? Why does it matter if you pay attention to communication? There's a whole bunch of answers to this, but on the screen here, you'll see one thing I've noted is it helps to resolve conflict. So I find a lot of times conflict comes up because people aren't communicating the same way. There's a misinterpretation. I'm thinking they're meaning something, they're meaning something else altogether. And so if you can adjust your communication, it can help resolve conflict. So if I can understand why, why they don't like it if I share too much information or if I go on too long, if I can understand that and adjust to that, then I can build a stronger relationship. The other side is, and I love the quote that I've heard many times. I don't know whose quote it is, but teamwork makes the dream work. And the truth is that when you adjust your communication with that other person, you become team members rather than people that are opposed to each other. So that's another benefit of adjusting your communication. And then the third benefit, not on the screen here, is that the other person feels like, again, you truly get them, you truly understand them, and it's a lot easier for them to build a relationship with you because of that. If you think of an example, if you go into a store to buy something and you're a person that's not super high energy, and the first person you meet at the store is super high energy, chances are you're not going to build a relationship with them as if you were interacting with somebody who's more like you. And so when you think about, if somebody's so high energy, they're bouncing off the walls and that's not who you are, how does that feel whenever they're interacting with you like that? It's probably not too pleasant. And so if you can be the person that adjusts your communication to the other person, I think you'll find you'll build a relationship much quicker. And of course, tonight I'm going to talk to you about the 4 personality types and how you can actually read them and adjust to them. So miscommunication or misinterpretation is what I feel is really the cause for most conflict, most problems, most challenges in the world. And I put a picture up of a TV show called Three's Company. I'm not going to assume who does or doesn't know of the show. It's definitely an older show. They still run the reruns. But if you remember Three's Company, and if you don't, I'll tell you about it in the sense that it was basically the 3 people on the screen were roommates. So, and this was back in the 70s. And for the context of the show, it was really frowned upon that it was a guy living with 2 female roommates. But the show itself, and ran for about 5 years, something I didn't realize when I was a kid, but I realized years later looking back at it, is almost every single episode was built around miscommunication. So as an example, one of the actors, or one of the characters, so Jack in the middle, the guy, could be on the phone, and Janet, the one on the left, would open the door from the kitchen and overhear Jack talking about something. And she would misunderstand what he was saying. So he could say, I have a bun in the oven. And he could mean down at the bakery he owned. But that's also in the 70s was a way to say, I got someone pregnant, or I am pregnant, one of the two. And so she would think the whole episode that he got somebody pregnant, even though he was just meaning he had a bun in the oven down at the bakery. But every episode was built around a misunderstanding. And then the rest of the episode was them acting on the misunderstanding until they finally found out what the real situation was. And so I bring this up because that's how powerful miscommunication can be, is that they built 5 years of a weekly TV show around just the premise of miscommunication. And what they went through, the reason I think it was universal and the show did so well, is because we could all relate, because we've all had those circumstances where we misunderstood or misinterpreted what the person meant. And so one of the things I find you can do to avoid miscommunication, or to make sure there isn't miscommunication, is these 4 steps. You can practice these 4 steps. So the first one is listening. And when I say listening, I want to add listening to actually hear what the person means. There's a difference between listening and active listening. And so when I say active listening, I mean really listening to that person and being in the moment with them rather than being distracted and thinking about something else. So the first step is, if somebody says something to you, actually listening to what they're saying, like fully listening and being in the moment with what they said. Now, the next part I put here is repeating. And what I'm suggesting here is it's very powerful if you can repeat back your understanding of what they said. And the reason for this is because it forces you to listen. Because for you to repeat back what they said, you have to have listened to them in the first place. So if somebody says, as an example, let's say it's in sales and you're talking about a car, and they say, do you have the car in red? And if so, do you also have the new feature that's that basically this type of air conditioning? Repeating could be, so if I understand what you're asking me, are you wondering if we have this type of air conditioning? And then you could basically repeat it back. And it proves you were listening, but it also forces you to listen. Now, that's a pretty basic way of saying it, but it's whatever they said. And the more complex of what they said, it's more important that you understand it. So repeating it, make sure you understand and that you actually are listening to what they said. The next part is responding. So, of course, giving your answer. So if they were asking about the car and if it has this certain feature, obviously you would respond and say, yes, it does, or no, it doesn't. And then finally, clarifying that you answered their question. So now I just want to make sure, when you asked about that, did I fully answer the question or did I leave anything on the table? And so by practicing these 4 steps, the chances of miscommunication go dramatically down. So listening to hear what they said and being in the moment with them when they're saying it, repeating it back to make sure you fully understood it, answering the question that they did ask if it was a question, and then clarifying that you fully answered it. So if you can practice these 4 steps, it can go a long way to make sure you avoid miscommunication. The most common reason now for miscommunication, so I can share that as well, is a false assumption and taking action on the false assumption. So what I mean there is they say something, you don't necessarily understand what they're saying, and then you take action on it based on what you thought they said when really that wasn't it. And all of a sudden, that's when miscommunication happens. So they could say, we could be, actually, I'll give you an example from the TV show Seinfeld, but I'm thinking of the episode where George thought he had a new job, but the person said to him, George, we think you'd be a great asset here at the company. However, and then somebody interrupted them, and it was to do with a major thing. So George never got to hear the last part of what they said. And so George thought the person was going to say, and we're going to hire you. And so then what happened is he went back to his other job and quit because he thought, well, I'm going to be hired. And then he ultimately found out that the person was going to say, you'd be a great asset here. However, I don't have the ability to hire you. I'm not the person in charge of that. And somebody else got hired in his place. So you can see he took a false assumption that they were going to hire him based on the first part of what the person said, quit his job, and all of a sudden now he doesn't have the new job or the old job. So that's where miscommunication happens, when you misunderstand or make an assumption and take action on it. So you can avoid that by obviously going back to those 4 steps I mentioned. The other thing I want to mention before I jump right into personality types is a thing that I learned in the stand-up comedy world called the red light method. So what the red light method is in the red light, I'll say in the red light world of comedy, whenever you're performing stand-up, you have a certain amount of time. So you might have 10 minutes on the stage. If you're new to comedy, you might have 5 minutes. You might have a half hour. But typically, the club will keep, especially the newer comics, they want to keep you to time so you don't eat into somebody else's time or to make the show go past or over time. And so they have a red light, a lot of clubs, comedy clubs at the back, where they can turn the red light on to let you know it's either time to wind down or you're done now. And in some comedy clubs, they'll go so far as to shut your mic off if you don't finish talking. So you could be in the middle of a joke and sorry, now you're not going to ever finish the joke. Why I put this on here is, and think of this in an interview especially, I'm sure you've all experienced times whenever you've said too much. So, maybe everything was going great, and then you talked too long. And there get to be a point where you heard them sigh because now they're behind for a meeting or they're running late. You never want to go to the point in any situation, especially a meeting, and especially an interview, where they feel like you've talked so much that now they're behind on something else because it leaves it on a bad tone. So what I want you to think of is the red light method going forward to make sure you always try to finish what you're saying before you feel the red light will be turned on. So trying to read the energy of the room and never trying to overstay your welcome. I call this sometimes trimming out the business or the communication fat. And so the red light method, though, I always think of that, whether I'm doing a presentation, whether I'm in front of somebody, I always think of, don't try to basically build such a relationship and stay so long that I go to the opposite point and I basically make the sale and then buy it back, or get the job and then lose the job. So the red light method has served me really well, just thinking about how can I make sure that I finish on time. I will say too, in Toastmasters, they use a red light. A lot of Toastmasters clubs, if you're familiar with Toastmasters, and basically what they do is they have a red light. They have actually 3 lights, but the red light's the final one. And if you keep talking to the point where it hits the red light, they start clapping over top of you so you can't finish speaking. And the idea, again, is to get you to finish early and or on time. So that's the red light method. So I'm going to leave this on the screen for a second so you can read what it says here. But this is just a little tiny joke around personality types before I jump right in. So personality types, as I mentioned, this can be a game changer for everyone watching and listening here in relation to careers. Because if you can, in an interview or in front of somebody, read their personality type and adjust to them so they feel like, again, you get them, or you're on the same wavelength as them, or you have the same energy as them, you're going to build a quicker relationship than if they feel like for some reason they don't get you or you don't get them. And so what I want to talk about now, and this is the core of almost everything I want to focus on tonight, is the 4 different personality types that make the world go round. And so the first one I want to talk about is what I call the red personality types. Now, I'll add, I give them each a color because I just find that way it's easier to remember. Some people with personality types use names, and some people use animals. You know, there's lots of different personality type systems. For me, I found the colors is easier to remember. So that's the approach I'm going to take tonight. And so first of all, I wanted to talk about what I call the red personality type. So the red personality type is, and as I say this stuff, I should mention, you might start discovering your own personality type as I say this. You might think about somebody that you talked to recently or somebody that you know and start picturing their personality type. It might be a spouse. It might be a friend. You might start picturing, oh, that's why they do this. And that's okay. That's actually good because it means you're starting to quickly understand the different personality types and how to read them quickly. So the first personality I wanted to talk about, again, is the red. And the red we'll call the director, or the person that's the leader, the natural leader, the person that's always in charge. And so typically, you'll find if you think about in a career, a red personality type is usually the person that's running the company, whether it's a CEO, whether it's the leader, whether it's the manager, or the owner. They don't have to obviously be in that career role. I mean, they might not even have a career, but just to make it easy to understand the personality type, if I go with that, it's the person that's really short and to the point. So when they're talking, if they send you a text, for instance, they're usually answering yes, no, maybe. They're not providing long answers. If you send them an email, it's quick replies, quick responses. It's never they never write out a full novel. It's always short and to the point. They're typically speaking, they're usually commanding. So they try to take charge. They try to lead the situation. They're also the person that wants to make it about what's the benefit of this? Why is this important? They're not usually as big on small talk. And, you know, as an example, why I put Steve Jobs on the screen is Steve Jobs, one of the things he figured out when it came to technology was how to relate to reds. So how to relate to the people that, because I should add too, the red personality types usually make decisions quickly. They usually spend more money and stuff. They're usually the person that buys the high-end vehicles and the high-end toys. So Steve Jobs understood that those people probably are buying the iPhones and the devices for the whole office. But secondly, and this is maybe more important, is that he realized a lot of people are struggling to sell to those personality types. Because another trait about red is they don't like knowing all the details of stuff. So in other words, they don't like knowing all the features. So if you were selling them a house, they don't want to know how all the measurements. They don't care about the measurements of the pool. They just want to know how it's going to work its way into their life. So what he figured out is they wanted to know how to use these devices in a simple way, and that they didn't really care to know all the reasons why. They just wanted to know how to use it. And so if you think about whenever he talked about the iPod when it first came around and how it was going to replace your CD player, what he talked about was he used the term 1,000 songs in your pocket. So rather than saying it's this many megabytes or gigabytes, at the time it was megabytes, this many megabytes of storage so it can hold this many songs or all that kind of stuff, he didn't go there because the red personality types wouldn't understand what that megabytes were, and they would never ask. They usually won't ask because they don't want to be embarrassed. So what he understood was if I can tell you it's 1,000 songs in your pocket, that's all you need to know. It just tells you can bring along this phone and it'll bring your whole music library, and that's all you care about. And so he got it. And the same with, there's an app for that is another thing he said. You know, so the idea that You don't have to really know what the app does. You just need to know what problem you have, and the app will fix it. There's an app to solve that. So the red personality type essentially is that person that's usually, just to summarize it again, short and to the point. They want you to be punctual. They're all about the importance of value of time. When they say that you have 15 minutes to share something, you probably only have 10. They're usually a director. They're usually in charge. They usually like to basically lead the way and lead the charge. So now flipping that, if you're in an interview, for example, with a red, you're going to notice it because you're going to notice that the more you go into detail, the more they lose interest. Just to be full disclosure, they will lose interest quicker than others. The other thing you'll notice is that if you walk into the interview 2 minutes late, you may have already lost the job because it's so important to them that you value their time that they're going to be focused on that. The other thing is if they say we have 45 minutes, then don't think about going longer than 45 minutes because you'll lose them. They might be in the parking lot driving their car away and you're still talking. So one thing you can do if you think you spot a red personality type is you can actually ask them, how much time do we have? And so if they say, well, we have 45 minutes, then you know to make sure you finish in 40. And so when it comes to a red, basically how you're going to notice it is some of those traits I shared with you. You're going to notice if they're quick and to the point, if they speak very succinctly, if they don't spend a lot of time talking about details, if they talk about what the benefit to the company or the situation is. And so what you're going to do is you're going to look for those situations, and then you're going to adjust accordingly. So then what this means is you're going to try to become like a red. So your answers are going to be shorter. You're going to be more succinct. If they say you have 15 minutes, you're going to take 10. If they are trying to lead the charge, then even if you would normally be in charge, you might want to let them feel like they're leading because they'll like that. You want to talk about what's in it for them rather than trying to talk all about the features of the situation. And so that's, in a very short nutshell, a red personality type. And I say a very short nutshell because this presentation I'm delivering tonight in roughly 45 to 50 minutes, allowing time for questions, is something that I've done over a full day. So you can imagine you can get into assessments of asking questions to figure out what personality type you are and what personality type your spouse is and why that works so well together and all those kind of things. So you can go really deep into this, but I really just want the takeaway for you to know the different personality types quickly and how to adjust to them. And also, and of course, I'll be answering questions at the end so I can circle back if there's anything unclear, for example, with a red. So the second one I want to talk about is what I call the yellow personality type. Now, the yellow personality type is the very social butterfly type personality. So this is the person, the exact opposite as a red. They usually end up being in sales because they love communication. They don't mind talking, even if it's an hour and a half. They typically are big on relationships. So relationships will mean more to them typically than money or business. And so they like building relationships and cultivating them. Typically they're social. And I mentioned that social at the top, but how that relates is they typically talk a lot more than some of the other personality types. And so the challenge you might have with a yellow is that they might talk too much or too long. And you might be trying to get out the door and struggling with that because they just are so social that they want to keep talking. But again, you'll notice that they're very social. They're very open. So they use their hands a lot to talk. They're open people in general. They will tell you a lot about themselves. They don't mind small talk. They'll talk about the weather. They typically aren't as focused as watching the clock. They don't try to be in charge as much. And so, again, in an interview situation with a yellow, what you'll notice is that they're very social with you. If you open up the dialogue and start talking about a certain area, they'll be willing to talk to you for a while about that. They won't probably tell you we only have 45 minutes. And if you ask how long you have, they might even say, don't worry about that. We got all kinds of time. And I used to joke and say, I think they basically grow time trees in their backyard because they just seem to have so much time. And they just love being social. So I give you an example to visualize a yellow. In the little city where I'm at right now, where I grew up and moved away from for years, but moved back to, the local car dealership. I did some training for them around personality types. And they said their biggest challenge in the service department was the yellow personality types that would come in and drop off the car and then stand at the counter and talk to them for 3 hours while they were trying to serve at their customers. So they have a waiting area. Instead of going and sitting in the waiting area, they would just stand at the counter and say, "How's Jimmy doing these days?" And they just want to chat and, have a great conversation while the service person is trying to get their work done. And at the same time, if I go back to the red personality type, the red personality type's more apt to either have a replacement car, have somebody pick them up, or use the courtesy car, or have the car dealer drop them off at work so they can get back to work and get back to what they want to do. So that's the difference, a big contrast between the red and the yellow. Interestingly enough, in relationships, you'll see a lot of relationships where there's a red and a yellow. So you'll see, and if you look around the supper table, just to kind of give you an example, the red would be the person that says, comes home and they just want to eat their supper, and the yellow would be like, let me tell you about my day, and the red might go, "Oh, great, here we go, long stories." And that's how they interact. You might see that in relationships that where the red is very reserved and they're not super talkative, and the yellow wants to tell them all about their day. You could also compare it to a networking. If you go to networking events, the red will be the person that's very sort of standoffish and maybe over in the corner talking to one person the whole night. The yellow is the person in the center, working the room, talking to everybody. And so that you can hopefully see when I show those two contrasts, how different both personality types are, but obviously in an interview, how you could adjust to the two of them. Because a yellow, again, is going to be very social. So why not be a little bit more social? Why not be willing to talk a little bit more? Why not have the conversation with the yellow? With the red, again, you're going to want to make sure that you're succinct, you're to the point. What you'll also maybe run into, and I should cover this too, and again, I can cover this at the end, but you might run into a situation where you have both personality types. Actually, you might have all four, but both personality types across the table from you. And so the more you understand these two personality types, for instance, the better you're going to be able to relate to both people. So the red might be there across from you interviewing you, and they might want short, succinct answers, and the yellow might be across from you, and they might want to be social. So what you would do is you would juggle that then. You become sort of a chameleon then for both. If the red is on that side, then you give short answers, you are succinct in your answers. And then the yellow, they ask more social questions. They ask you more what I call open-ended questions. And then you're going to be able to tell a little bit more about yourself. I should clarify that too, because I'm not sure everybody knows those two differences, but open-ended questions versus closed-ended questions, that's another way you can both tell a red from a yellow and how you should react to both. But a red will typically ask a lot of closed-ended questions. So a closed-ended question would be a question where they're looking for you to answer yes or no, or they're looking for you to answer a definitive answer. So it's not a question where you could go in a lot of direction. They might say, do you, as an example, would you like to work at this company? So if you notice that they're a red, they're probably looking for a yes, and then they're probably going to jump on and go from there. Whereas the yellow might say, tell me about why you'd like to work at this company. And so you can see those are very different questions. So open-ended means they're asking the question and they're not expecting a closed answer, just a one-word answer. Whereas closed-ended, it's like, I just want a yes or no. I just want, if I say, how many listeners do you have on your radio show? They just want to know 30,000. They don't want to know 30,000. But at the same time, some weeks we have this. They don't want to know that. So a closed-ended question is looking for that definitive answer. So
we have a question by Thomas. Is it okay to ask questions now, or do you want to wait until then?
Whatever works for you, I'm okay with.
Okay, Thomas, do you want to ask a question?
Okay, yeah, sure. So how can we balance, like, if I'm a yellow and I have a red beside me, what I can do to balance?
So now, when you say if you have a red beside you, Thomas, do you mean like a red that's, I guess I'll clarify. Do you mean, for example, if we use the interview circumstance, do you mean if you're talking to a red in an interview setting? Is that an example, or?
Yeah, like could be in an interview or in general. Like if I'm a yellow and I'm dealing with a red, or if I'm a red and I need to deal with a yellow.
Right.
How? So now that I'm aware that those differences exist, how can I deal with that? What I can do, like.
Yeah, absolutely. So so for instance, let's just use the example if you're a yellow and they're a red. So I'll just, we can either pick either or, right? It could be you're a red or you're a yellow and the other person's the opposite. So what you would do is, now that you're aware of it, and again, I'll use the example if you were very social and you know the person across from you is not, what you're going to try to do, and I'm not going to promise it's going to be easy, because typically speaking, we usually have one dominant personality type, and the other ones, if we have any of them at all, they're less dominant. So there's one that's the one that comes out of us the most, which is why we notice it from the other person. So if you're a yellow and you're sitting across from a red and you're having a conversation, or sitting beside, doesn't matter, then what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to try to adjust to the red. So if you're the person that understands this stuff and you're trying to get the job, like I usually say, whoever's the customer, they should be the one that does the adjusting. So whether you're in sales or whether you're trying to get the job, you're the customer if you're the one trying to convince somebody. So what I'm getting at there is you would be the one that wants to adjust. So what you do is you look at that red personality type that I shared and you say, okay, even though I'm very social, even though I love to chat about small talk and the weather and all that kind of stuff, what I'm going to do while I'm sitting across from this person is I'm actually going to try to adjust more to what they're like. So I'm actually going to try now to be less social. I'm going to try to say things a lot quicker rather than having a very long answer. I'm going to try to look at their time. If they say they have a certain amount of time, I'm going to try to be very conscious that my answers are short and sweet. I'm going to try, for instance, to even ask. So I told you about closed-ended questions a second ago. You may even want to try to ask closed-ended questions with the red, because they're going to appreciate that you're valuing their time. Another thing, and this is a really big one with a red, is it's about the time, as I mentioned. It's so crucial to them. So what you really will gain a lot of brownie points or a lot of points with a red by doing is asking how much time you have. So right off the top, if you can tell they're a red and they're all about time, be the first to say, how much time do we have? I want to make sure that I don't take up too much of your time. They'll love that because time's so important to them. So they'll say, this is somebody that appreciates what's important to me. So what you'll want to do essentially is, once you understand the 4 personality types, you'll want to try to basically become a mirror for that person. So you're going to want to try to adapt to that person. And that could mean, if you're very social, being a little less social than you would normally be. If they say how much time you have, then making sure you stay under that time. An example could be, if you know they're not very social, don't ask about the picture on their wall if you only have 20 minutes, because they probably don't want to talk about the picture on their wall if they only have 20 minutes, and time's important to them. A good example is a friend of mine who's a realtor, and he's a yellow, and he used to struggle with reds because he would go in and start talking to them over lunch about all these little things about their life and family, and he thought he was building a relationship with them. But at the end of the meeting, after a half hour, they'd say, well, sorry, Roger, my lunch is up now. I got to go back to work. I'll talk to you later again. And he said he'd never make the sale because they'd leave and he didn't know why. But they would just say, well, I'd rather deal with somebody else because Roger in a half hour doesn't get to the point. And then I end up losing my whole lunch hour and I still don't know anything more about buying a house. So hopefully that helps, Thomas. But what you're really wanting to do is you're wanting to look at those things I said that make up that other personality type. And essentially what you want to do is adjust or adapt to the traits of that other person. Does that help as far as the answer?
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
And Thomas as well, once we go through the other 2 personality types, it'll probably give you also a little bit more thoroughness on it. And then at the end, I'll circle back with the 4. So if there's still questions on it, please let me know.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. So Ahmed, is there any other questions or?
No, that's good for now. Just quick chats, but we can continue after you finish.
Okay, perfect. So that was the yellow. Now I want to jump on to the blue personality type. And so the blue personality type, the best way I can describe them is they're typically, you remember I mentioned features, like for example, the features of your phone or the measurements of the house or the pool. The blue personality types, they care about that. They love researching. That's why I have all the books here in the picture. They love rolling up their sleeves and learning about the other person. They don't mind asking lots of questions. And so the blue personality type typically is not sure if you're the right fit. So they're going to ask questions to try to feel and figure out if you're the right fit. So often, if you talk again career types, it could be somebody who's in engineering because they love the detail and the features. There's somebody often in IT, so information technology on the computer side, because they don't mind doing all the research and learning all the things about how to make this computer run. And so typically speaking, a blue personality type, they're very standoffish at first. Like they're really almost confrontational because they're not sure if you're trying to pull the wool over their eyes, if you're the right person. And so they're harder to build a quick relationship with. They also, again, ask a lot of questions. They're also very feature driven. So they want to know all the little details. They're the person that will go through your whole website. And then if you tell them something that they saw on the website that's not in alignment with what you had in the website, they'll call you on it. They'll say, well, that's not what I read on your website, because they've actually done the research and gone all through your website. When I was in sales and I was selling photocopiers, the blue personality types are the ones that had a million questions about how did it work? Can it connect to our network? How does it do this? What are these features? Really, what's the benefit of them? And they would want to get the contract from me, and they would go through everything in the contract, every last word. So they're very, very, very detailed oriented. So again, if we go to the example of in an interview, they would be the ones that are going to ask you a lot of questions. And if you ask questions about the company or a lot of questions, they're going to have plenty of answers. So they're not going to mind answering all those questions. And they usually tend to do a lot of research, so they really know their stuff. And so, again, a blue personality type, you can see how they're different than a red and a yellow. They're not as social as the yellow. And even though they ask a lot of questions, they are more to the point, kind of like a red. But the difference is with a red, where you can basically build a good relationship with them by putting focus on their time, that won't necessarily work with a blue. What a blue wants to know is whenever they ask you these questions, they want to know you either have the answers or you can get the answers. And so, again, they're not social like a yellow, and they're also not as shut down as a red, where I mentioned that a red, typically speaking, won't give a lot of long answers. They want to keep it to a certain time. The blue doesn't mind taking time to answer the questions. So again, what I want you to think about here is features. So they love talking features. They don't mind long conversations about all the minute details of everything. So in an interview, again, they're going to probably ask you a lot of questions, and they don't mind if you ask a lot of questions. So that's a blue in a nutshell. And again, I'm going to full circle these at the end as well. I will say too, reading and adjusting to a blue. So what you want to do if you want to adjust to a blue is if you notice they're very detailed oriented, if you notice that they're asking questions, you want to do your best to answer those questions for them. But you also want to be honest. This is a big thing with a blue, because if they catch you in something that you're not being honest with, you can burn the relationship. So they'll rather you say, I'm not sure of the answer right now, but can I get back to you on that? They would rather that than you just trying to fake your way through an answer. So with the blue, again, you're better off to answer the stuff you do know for sure. And if you're not 100% certain on something, get back to them on it. Also, at the same time, because they like the detail, they'll love it if you are willing to share some detail and go into more detail in your answers or questions than the other personality types would. So that's how you can adjust to a blue. And then finally, the fourth personality type is the green personality type. The green personality type, how you can recognize them typically is they're not quick to make decisions. So if you go in for an interview, going back to so I keep this all of a theme here, going back to the red personality type, they might decide before the interview's even done, they might say, you got the job. In fact, I watched an audition for an actor, the kid that played in E.T., Elliot. And in the audition, he was halfway through the scene and he was crying and using great emotions, and he was just basically stealing the scene. And this was in the audition. And then you heard the director say, kid, you got the job. And he was only halfway through the audition. And that's pretty normal for a red. And usually, by the way, in a movie, a red would be the director too. So not surprisingly, the red would be the one calling the shots and leading everything. So again, a red would make a quick decision. A yellow, like I say, because they're so social, they might not want the conversation to end. So they might want to bring you back just for the sake of, let's have another conversation. The blue, like the red, if they ask all their questions and they get a really good feel, they might make a decision on the spot, or they might not. They might want to take time to think about it. The green, the last one, they're not big on conflict, so they don't like confrontational conversations. They also don't make quick decisions. So they won't probably decide to hire you on the spot. They'll probably bring you in for maybe 3 interviews because they're just not sure. They don't want to make the wrong decision, and they worry about having peace of mind. So often in sales, what I'll tell salespeople, to adjust to a green, you want to talk a lot about the warranty, because the green wants peace of mind. So if they know that, for example, if you buy a new car, if they know it comes with a warranty of 5 years and that you'll take the car back and replace it, that's going to make a green really comfortable because they don't have to worry about what if this car doesn't work well. If they buy a trip, they would be the ones typically that will pay extra to have a cancellation on, say, Expedia or a travel website. They would be the type of person that would pay extra, even if it was $20 or $30 extra, to be able to cancel the trip, or they'll buy the insurance because they're really worried about what if this goes wrong. So when you're in an interview with them, you'll notice that they're maybe a little more nervous. They're not quick to make quick decisions in their questions or answers, that they might kind of jump around the question. If you answer something definitively, they might get a little nervous. So you'll be able to notice that they're just not big on firm decisions. Where, again, going back to a red, they'll be just short and to the point, and they stand firm in their decision or whatever they say. The green might not be. They might be, for lack of a better way of saying it, they might be a bit wishy-washy. They might be unsure. They might ask you a question and then kind of change their mind about the question and or the answer. And so that's typically a green. The commonalities between a green and a blue, though, is both want peace of mind. The blue is more, like I say, confrontational in the sense that they don't mind telling you, I think you're wrong, whereas a green won't say that. But both of them will ask a lot of questions because they both want peace of mind that you're the right person to hire for this job. They don't want to be left holding the bag if you're the wrong person. So they'll ask a lot more questions to make sure you're the right person. Whereas the red will just make a decision if they feel it in their gut that you're the right person. And like I said, the yellow wants to build a relationship, so it might take more time. So if you notice that the green is to that point, not making quick decisions, they're not really firm in any direction they're going, then what you might want to try to do is you might want to try to help by giving them that peace of mind. You might want to tell them a little bit more about your background that you feel relates to the job. You might want to tell them about why you'd be a good hire. You might want to tell them about when other people hired you years ago, here's what happened. So you just really want to give the green comfort. Basically, you're trying to give them comfort in the interview or the situation where they feel, okay, if I make this decision, I'm not going to be fired myself for hiring this person. And that's really what they're looking for. So just notice if they're struggling with not feeling sure on certain things, or they're asking a lot of questions, but it's more feels like it's because of an uncertainty, then what you want to do is you want to find ways to make them feel comfortable that you're the right person. So having said that, I'll finish off with saying that one of the things I learned a number of years ago is that if you want to become a good storyteller, and by the way, if you can become a brilliant storyteller, then you'll find it that you can actually get a job at almost any given time, and that you become indispensable. If you can really master the art of storytelling, then I think you'll find that you'll have company with anybody. Everybody will want to be around you because people love stories. We were born naturally around campfires telling stories. The picture here is from me at a sweat lodge, a First Nation sweat lodge, where we were around the sweat lodge telling stories. And so I just put it up there as a reminder to me of how important storytelling is. But the reason I put it in this presentation is because one thing that's really powerful, once you start really getting a feel for the personality types, is if you can actually tell stories based on the personality types. So what do I mean by that? Going back to the 4 personality types one last time. For example, if you're telling a red story, because they like to shorten to the point, you'll want to make sure that the story isn't very embellished and it isn't long and it doesn't have a lot of the finer details. It's just the core of the story. What's gonna get them excited about the story? If you're telling that same story to a yellow, however, the yellow will like all the finer details. They're social, so they'll like the visuals and the pictures, and if you can tell them more about the story and go in deeper, they might even care about the color of the shirt the person was wearing, whereas the red won't. But so the yellow, you'll be more social in the storytelling. With the blue, they'll want more details because, again, they like features and details. So they'll want more features in the story. They'll want to know more of the fine-tuned details. And the greens, they'll want more comfort in the story, more peace of mind in the story. So for example, if you were telling a story about why they're safe to hire you, you might say, again, going back to that point earlier, I understand totally where you're coming from. When I got my last job, they were worried that this might happen, and they hired me, and here's what they found out. And so now that story is a comfort story to a green because it actually tells them that you're a safe bet, and here's the proof based on a past story. So I just want to stress, if you can become a good storyteller, it'll serve you really well. And if you can then, and this will take some time, But if you can then incorporate, when you recognize you're talking to one of these personality types, if you can tailor the story to that personality type, you're good as gold, is the best way I'll say that. So, having said that, I just want to basically, as a summary, I shared the reasons for miscommunication, the 4 personality types that impact our communication, and that storytelling across personality types is one of the most powerful ways that you can build strong relationships. So, having said that, I'm going to, there, I closed it down. Perfect. So, that's the core of my presentation. So, happy to, of course, answer any Q&A or further communication, whatever direction we want to go.
First of all, thank you, Corey. This is really very nice and well done way of putting the personalities together. And I personally find myself a little bit red, a little bit yellow, so it depends. Like Ahmed said, orange maybe, but thank you for that. So we'll open up for questions, and again, if anyone wants to come off mute and come to camera and ask questions, feel free, please.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So, Corey, do you think it's possible, like during an interview, maybe I can identify, like you are doing the interview, and maybe you can identify if my interviewer is more blue, more yellow, and then maybe adapt or I need too much training to realize which color it will be.
So I think and I didn't mean to interject. I wasn't sure if you were done with the question. So do you mean as far as whenever you're in an interview, are you asking, how is it possible to recognize that personality type quickly, and then how can you adjust?
Yeah.
So I'm going to give you a short cut to how you can typically figure out which personality type you're talking to. One of the best approaches is to ask, and it's kind of weird because I told you about it with red, but to ask how much time you have. And the reason I say this is because the answer to that question is going to tell you which personality type you have. So I'll give you an example. If you say, how much time do you have? And it's a red personality, as we said earlier, they're going to say, well, you know what? I only have 45 minutes and we can't go over because of this. Now, by the way, I should add too, it doesn't mean they're always a red personality type. It just might mean they're a red today. So the reason this is important is I want you to not go, okay, well, Ahmed is usually a red and a yellow, so he's always a red and a yellow. Because you could be, and I'm both a red and yellow as well. But here's the thing. You could normally be a yellow, very social, but you could have something that disastrous that happens in your life that day. But you might not be as social as normal. So what I want you to know how to is adjust to the person in front of you right now. So to go back to your question, Thomas, when you ask, how much time do I have? If it's a red personality trait coming out, they'll say, well, we only have whatever amount of time. They'll be very fixed on, okay, we got 45 minutes. The yellow will say, we got all kinds of time. We got all the time in the world. The blue will probably say, well, I have a lot of questions, so it's probably going to take us a little while. And the green might say similar to that, but they might say, well, I need to really feel comfortable. You're the right person. So whatever amount of time it takes for that, that's how much time we need. That one question, how much time do we have, is going to start giving you clues right away. And then because now you're on the lookout for that, you'll notice if there's a similarity to the next question. Like, so if a red says, we only have 45 minutes, and then you'll notice right away after that, they say, you're in the middle of a thing, and they say, okay, sorry to interject, but I got to add this, or I got to ask this. Then you'll probably see, okay, this is a red because they're in charge, they're dictating the conversation, they're leading the conversation. Again, you might start saying something small talk, and the red will cut you off, whereas the yellow might say, it's interesting you say that. My cousin's like that. So again, that question about how much time do we have is a really good starting point for you. And then I think as you get more comfortable with this, you'll start to notice little tiny traits. It's little small things that you notice. And as long as you're adjusting to the person in front of you, you're never going to go wrong. You're better off doing that than if you go for 3 interviews, and the first 2 interviews, Ahmed's interviewing you and he's red, and then he switches to his yellow in the 3rd interview, and he's super social. Well, you're not going to still try to stay red because now he's yellow. So 2 things I'm saying is basically you have to be in the moment and kind of go with the flow. And then secondly, ask questions that you know will kind of get you that answer, like how much time do we have? Or, ask, like I said, close-ended questions. Ask a question where you know it's going to just get you a yes or no answer and see how they respond to that. If it's yellow, they're not even going to adhere to your yes or no question. You could say to a yellow, would you like to work here? They're going to say yes, and I'll tell you why. They're still going to give you the answer anyway. They're still going. So if you ask a close-ended question and they still give you an open-ended answer, then you know you're probably dealing with a more social person, or vice versa. So it's really in your questions that'll do.
Okay. Thank you.
We have another question. Paul, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah. Hi there, Corey. Is there a way to recognize the different types by dominant emotion too? I think like reds would be like kind of prone to getting angry or something like that.
Yeah. So great question. And I feel like it's almost yes is the answer, but it's almost like a trait that comes with all the other traits. So it's another one of the traits to recognize that yes, they get angry. Like I said, not at halfway through. So that's good, fine, but and just literally interrupt halfway through. I say this, I had a branch manager who was like that. And he was so strong with his red. I, as a salesperson, and I was one of the top salespeople, I would send him a long email because my yellow comes through there because I was trying to sell him on why he should give me a certain price for a customer. And he would come back and say, I didn't read all this, Corey, but the answer is yes. Or I didn't read all this, Corey, and the answer is no. But he was like firm and to the point. So yes, he could get angry easier than other people in the office. And at the same time, it was hard to read his emotions. So he was very like, almost like shut down. I don't know if that makes sense, but he was shut down. But if you pushed him, yes, he would get angry. So he wasn't scared to show you he was in charge. So yes, I would say, in fact, I've had people say when they think about the color types, oh, you're saying red because they get red in the face. So I've had people say that. And a yellow is more like sunshine, right? So a yellow, typically speaking, I'll say it on two ends. Here's the interesting part. A yellow is very social, so they're very chill. However, the yellow can also be very emotional because do you like me? Did I make the wrong decision? Did I say the wrong thing? So they overanalyze stuff. They're analytical in that way. The blue, as we talked about earlier, because they're trying to see if you're ripping them off or you're the wrong person or what have you, like the red, they can be a little more, they wouldn't get as mad as quickly, but they can still be a little more shut down and a little more cold. I would almost say cold would be the answer I'd go with, like just cold. I had a manager, another separate, different manager, who let somebody go. And then he started showing her a sweater that he bought for his wife and said, what do you think of the new sweater I bought for her? Right after he fired her. And he didn't think there's anything wrong with that because he's like, go get another job. He like no emotion tied to it at all. And that was his red. He was just next. But yet he was, outside of work, he was like, hey, yeah, I think the world of you. But see ya, you're gone. And so, yes, you could tie it to emotions. I mentioned the green. You would see maybe a little bit more nervous. And again, to that point, I want to clarify, as Ahmed said, you can be multiple personality types. So I don't want you to think always the green is going to be nervous. I just mean, yeah, on the emotional side, you can see them being a little bit more hesitant or nervous. So yes, I would say you can see it in the emotions as well, but I think it's the actions that you're going to see more than the emotions, if that makes sense. Sometimes you'll see the emotion, and yes, a red would probably get more angry than somebody else and feel, wait a minute, it should be my way, not anybody else's way. But where you're going to see it is usually they're cold and they're to the point and they're firm. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I can see parallels between. I guess I learned this as DISC. So, but yeah, I mean the traits are identical. So.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. So DISC, of course, I'd be talking about the D, the director.
Right.
So it's funny because I didn't learn DISC. Whenever I learned this, I learned a thing called personality mapping, and then I read a book called Personality Plus. That's where I first discovered it. But what happened is I tailored it. I made it my own in the sense that I was in sales, and so I tailored it for sales. So I was going, how does this relate to salespeople? Whereas DISC and Myers-Briggs, as an example, would be more hiring, for example. I was going on the sales side. So I went out and I kind of discovered it in the trenches. After I read about it, I'm like, I'm going to explore this. And I learned it firsthand, and then I learned about DISC later. But to your point, Personality Plus, personality mapping, DISC, insights, true insights, mind, they're all the colors is another one. They're all the same. Like they're the four, and I always tell people that if you've learned another one, don't try to replace DISC with mine. All I really care is that you know what the four personality types are. It really is similar. So in your case here, you already know DISC. Keep knowing DISC. I would, because we only have so much room in our head. I don't want to try to replace something you already know.
Yeah.
Something else. So yeah, it's the same premise. And you probably knew when I went to the four personality types, which of the DISCs which in this that I was talking about. Cool. But yeah, I do agree that emotion plays its way into it, but I think you also see the action that goes with the emotion, because a lot of people obviously don't want to share their emotion behind it, but you're still going to see the action that comes out of it.
Yeah, we have maybe another last question. Maybe Mohammed, do you want to come off mute and ask your question?
Yeah, thank you very much for informative presentation. I appreciate your input. I have a simple question actually. Imagine if I am in a meeting with a committee or teamwork, first time I meet this or business meeting or stuff like that, and everyone has different personality from red to green, and I have fluctuation to move my personality according to the color. Do you have any idea or advice I can detect from first question the personality of this member?
So if I understand the last part there, did you say, can you take that one question and then relate the answer to all four? Is that?
No, like we are in the meeting committee or stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I am dealing with different personality. Okay.
Right.
So my question, how I can detect the personality of the person who asked the question? If he is red, I can apply red. If green, I can apply green, and so on.
So what I would do, there's a couple of things you can do there. One, it depends, of course, how much insight they're going to give you in the way they ask that question. So there's some cases where the way they ask the question will tell you which type of personality they are. If it's not that case, the other thing you can do is you can actually go back and ask a clarifying question. So in other words, if I'll try to think of an example for you, but for example, if a red says to you, well, let's just get to the bottom line, how much does this thing cost? And by the way, that's something a red would say, because a red will just go, okay, well, it costs this, let's go with it. You'll find also a red, they don't, especially in front of other people, they don't like negotiating as much. Often, like in front of other people, it depends on the circumstance. But for example, if they're buying a car, a red's more apt to pay close to the sticker price than one of the other personality types, because they feel I'm buying value and all that kind of stuff. So a red might say, let's just get to the point, how much does it cost? Because they don't care about all the details. So first of all, that would be a clue for you. But to answer your question, if they said something like that, but yet you're still unsure. So if they said it maybe a more polite way, like, well, really what matters to us is what the price is. And maybe they don't say it like that way we said about with their emotions, or they're not firm with it or what have you, then you could ask a clarifying question to them. So for example, I'll give you an example. You could say, and this goes to the sales side, but when you ask about the total price, do you mind me asking, do you mean the purchase price, or do you mean the total price you're going to pay with everything included? So for example, and I'll use an example, if I was talking a car, there's a difference between the purchase price of the car and what it costs to operate the car as a total cost of ownership. Or when we sell photocopiers, let's say as an example, we would sell the copiers and there was a price to buy the copier, but of course then there's a price to service the copier. So the total cost of ownership is what is it going to cost me over 5 years versus what does it cost up front. So you could ask the question, when you say that the price, do you mind me asking, do you mean the total price, total cost of ownership, or do you mean the purchase price? And the way the person answers that question is probably going to start giving you hints as to who they are, because a red will just say, no, I just want to know the price, period. I asked for the price. Whereas the blue, going to the blue, will say, yeah, of course, I want to know the total cost of ownership. I want to know all the details involved, because I don't want us to get stung finding out we have to pay service for this later on that we didn't factor in. So does that make sense? And what I'm getting at is that, first of all, hopefully the question, the way they ask it, will give you the answer. But if it doesn't, you can follow up with a question to ideally start getting the answer as to what personality type there. But at the same time, don't get so lost in it. If you're in a situation where there's 12 people and there's maybe 3 reds, 2 greens, don't get so lost in it that all of a sudden you're confusing them and they're confusing you and everybody's confused. Meaning there's a point where it gets really complex to do it. I've been doing it a long time, so I can read quickly and adjust quickly. But if I can't read a person, this is an example, if I can't read that it's a red for sure or not, I'm not going to try to adjust in that second and read it wrong. So if they say to me, what's the price? I might ask a clarification question, as I mentioned. And I might say, do you mean the total cost of ownership or the purchase price? Well, guess what? They could throw me a loop and say both. Why don't you tell us about both? Now, I still don't know anymore what personality type it is. Well, then what I'm going to do, Mohammed, is I'm just going to tell them the price. I'm going to tell them both options and give them their answer. So what I'm getting at is, yes, I want to try to adjust as much as possible, but I also don't want to do it to the point where I'm misleading myself, and now all of a sudden making it more complex than it had to be. So I don't want you guys to get so far into it that you get that complex that all of a sudden you're getting confused and stressed about it. And really where you're going to see the biggest benefit of this is usually 1 or 2 people. You're going to be able to adjust the most to 1 or 2 people. When you think about a real estate agent and they're doing an open house, they'll usually have a husband and a wife across from them, right? Almost 90% of the time, the husband and wife, opposites attract. They're going to be 2 different personality types. So a good realtor is going to have to adjust to 2 of those people. But if you then brought in their whole family and there was 25 people there to buy the house, the realtor is going to actually have a worse sales situation by trying to adjust to 25 people. They're better off then just to answer the questions that are asked of them. So when you say a committee, if it's 4 people, I'd probably still try to adjust maybe because I've been doing it a while. But if it's 25 people on a committee, I wouldn't be trying to read this person while this person over here is ready to ask the question. So I'm hoping that answered the question, but clarification question you could ask them. And the other side is, if you can, look at how they asked the question and just try to respond based on how they answered it. If they asked it. If they said, that's all great and fine, thanks for sharing all that, but we need to know the price, then give them that price just as easy and quick as they just asked you the question.
Thank you,
Thank
Corey.
you very much. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Any other final thoughts anyone want to share before we maybe take the group selfie? No? Okay, so I will maybe give you a few seconds if anyone wants to come to the camera, and we'll say 1, 2, 3, and then we'll take the good smile and take the shot. So whenever you're ready, 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay, cool. That's a nice shot. Okay, thank you so much, Corey. Thank you everybody for joining today, and really appreciate your wisdom today, and very excited about what you shared with us, and we'll definitely use this in future calls. Mike, any final thoughts from your side?
No, I think it's absolutely great. It'll help me read people better than I'm trying to read them now. So it's great.
Thank
Very,
you.
very good. Very insightful.
Raquel, Crystal, Paul, Wael, anything from your side? Ellen, all good? Okay, thanks everybody.
Thank you
Enjoy the
very
rest of
much.
the
Good night,
evening.
everyone.
Have a great night. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ahmed. Take care.